So I've been getting quite a bit of grinding when I apply the brakes. It sounded like it was my front right, but it looks like it is my rear right. And if we look, that powder is actually on there pretty good, but it does come off. So it looks like I'm having something go on there. You can see the rear rotor is pretty dorked up. So we're gonna go ahead and put it up on the jacks. We're gonna see what we got. At this point, with the way that rotor is looking, it's probably gonna require a rotor replacement as well as brake pads. Here in Ohio, we are in the Rust Belt, so this is what happens. It sounds like I'm playing a washboard. Impressive. Let's go ahead and put it up and see what we got. For comparison, here is the rear left. And while we do have rust, did I mention Rust Belt? The rotors are almost mirror smooth, mirror reflective versus the other side there. So we're gonna go ahead and grab the jack and see what we got. So back to the rear right side, we have our jack and our jack stand. For those of you who don't know, there's gonna be a little ridge right here. You can see there's two notches, and those notches work pretty well. Usually you'll use this to jack it up. I don't need torque, I need speed. So I'm just gonna cycle it with my hands here. And you can see it's gonna raise up right into those two notches. And we're gonna go ahead and take it up the rest of the way and put the jack stand. We do not rely on a jack. Jacks are designed to go up and down. Jack stand does not compress. So before we take the wheel off the ground with the jack, we're gonna go ahead and get our supplies. We have some deep well sockets, we have a breaker bar, and we have our torque wrench. We're gonna use the torque wrench to put the lug nuts back on. I'm gonna use the breaker bar to break them off. We wanna do that before we raise the tire off the ground, because tires off the ground tend to rotate, which defeats the purpose of you trying to rotate the lug nut off. So this is also relevant if you're changing your tire on the side of the road, if you have a flat, something like that. It's best not to jack it up and then try and take off the 5 lug nuts. In addition to the tire rotating as you're trying to get the lug nuts off, defeating any kind of torque or leverage you have, you're also going to be sloshing the wheel, which is going to slosh your axle, which is going to shake your car and make it unstable when it's already unstable enough on a jack or on a jack stand. So we're going to go ahead and break each one of them free, maybe one full rotation on all 5 of those lug nuts. We're going to take the tire up into the air, and then we're going to go ahead and spin off the lug nuts the rest of the way and take off the rim. All right, the next tip is we have our breaker bar, and we're going to use that to get enough leverage to break the lug nuts off. We're looking at 90 foot-pounds of torque on these guys. So there's 2 ways you can go about it. We're going to be going counterclockwise. That's how you loosen. So I usually say people work around the clock to build something, to put something together. So that's going to be the clockwise rotation. To tear something apart is counterproductive, typically. So you're going to be going against the clock on that one. The lefty-loosey, righty-tighty thing, I always get that backwards. So that works for me. What we're going to do is there's 2 different ways you can do this. One, you can lift the leverage bar and try and break the lug nuts free. The other way is you can try and push down on the leverage bar to break those lug nuts free. If you can lift more than you weigh, all the power to you. Even if you can, that takes energy for you to do, and you're probably going to try snapping to get those bolts free. That is not what we want. So the trick here is to use your body weight. Go ahead and stand on the breaker bar and slowly step down, and you break them free. That required no lifting. That required no weight training on my part. So if you're older, if you're female, if you don't have any upper body strength, you don't need it. Just go ahead and step on the breaker bar, use your body weight to go ahead and break those guys free. And then we'll, as I said, go ahead and jack it up and take it the rest of the way off. So now we have jacked up the car enough that we could fit the jack stand under it. I am just a little too high on the jack, so I'm going to lower it down. Before we do that, I want to show you guys that we did in fact brace the other wheels. So if it should slip, the car is not going to go rolling too far. We're going to go ahead and lower the car onto the jack stand. And what you run into with a Subaru like this is they start with from the factory at I believe it's just shy of 9 inches. I think it's 8.5 inches worth of ground clearance, and that's going to be the distance between the bottom of your frame to the road surface. The higher that is, the better the clearance for you as you're going off-roading and stuff like that, going through snow. The difficulty becomes, right now my jack stand is pretty much maxed out, and you can see the upright support here is probably at like 80-85 degrees. So I literally cannot pump that jack stand any higher, and I don't even know, I'm gonna run my fingers under there, I am just barely off the ground. So I'll show you the trick that I've learned with vehicles with higher ground clearance and how we're gonna go ahead and overcome that. And the trick that I've learned is to go ahead and put the jack underneath your suspension. So I'm going to be raising the suspension directly, not raising the car. And by raising my suspension, I'm going to be raising the wheel directly off the ground. So I now don't have to raise the vehicle up 2 feet to get the tire off the ground 2 inches. All I have to do is raise that suspension, compress my suspension shock there about 2 or 3 inches, and that will correlate directly to 2 or 3 inches of height for the tire coming off the ground. So I currently have my jack holding up my suspension, and I have my jack stand holding up the frame of the car. So at this point, even if I were to remove this wheel and accidentally knock the jack, or the vehicle starts rolling or something, the jack stand is going to keep the frame and the body of the car from bottoming out and causing any damage. So you do want to be super careful while doing the jack on your suspension. You want to make sure it has a good bite. The nice thing there is, while I was underneath, we were sitting at an angle like this. Now we're sitting directly on top of the jack stand. The more you start jacking the height up, the more level your, I forget what that is. I think it's the wishbone or what have you. But the more level that becomes, and the more stable it's going to be while on the stand. With that said, we're not going to yank, pry, pull, leverage, anything like that. At this point, we don't have to, because I've already loosened up my lug nuts when it was on the ground, and at this point I don't even need to use the bar at an angle for leverage. I can just spin it by hand because they're so loose. So I'm going to go ahead and get these 5 guys off, and we're going to see what we have. All right, so the next trick we have is get your tools and lug nuts out of the way. Several feet away from the tires. I don't need to be tripping over them, falling over them, putting my kneecap into them as I'm kneeling. So get that stuff out of the workspace and put them off to the side. Second, you'll notice there's 4 lug nuts here. You want to leave your bottommost one connected to the tire. And the reason for that is, when I remove all 5 of these, due to the weight of the tire and the rim being leveraged on just on the hub here, the tire is going to want to rotate out. The bottom here is going to want to swing towards me, and the top is going to want to swing into the vehicle. I want to be in control of that. So if I were to put it up here, there's going to be a lot more tension on that top lug nut than there is on the bottom. So what I'm going to do now is, I'm sitting on my butt. I'm going to go ahead and put both tires on either, both feet on either side of that tire. You can see I'm wobbling it, so it's good and loose. I'm going to go ahead and remove this guy, and now my feet are going to be doing the job that that bottom lug nut is, in that this tire is not going to rotate. It's not going to try pivoting on me until I move my feet out of the way, and I'm going to be in control of that action and let it happen when I am ready for it. So there are my 5 lug nuts. You can see I'm holding it with my feet. Again, if I were to put it on the top, I'm putting more leverage on that top nut than on the bottom. Make jokes as you feel fit. By using both my feet here, I'm holding it in place, and you'll notice as I lean back a little bit when I remove my feet, that tire is going to want to go ahead and rotate quite a ways. So by me being in control of that with my feet, I can go ahead and get it ready to take it off of the rear hub. So here's another trick. I saw this on another YouTuber channel. This is called the Widow Saver, and it saves your wife from becoming a widow by using the tire you just removed as a secondary fail-safe jack stand. So now the car can only drop as far as the depth of your tire, which will make it more safe should it end up failing. You risk scratching up your rims, which is worth the price of not having a collapsed chest cavity. Not that I'm going to be going underneath the car anyways, but if you're on the side of the road in the middle of the rain or in the mud or, you know, unideal conditions, instead of being at your driveway at home, this is an additional safety measure, and it gets your tire out of the way, and you remember where you put it, and you'll remember how to retrieve it. All right, so here we have the rotor. As I said, if you'll listen, that is quite scored, which tells me I'm dealing with something with the brake pad. This only grinds when I am applying my brakes, and it really only grinds from like 0 to 5, 0 to 10 miles an hour. It's kind of weird. So it's something to do with the brake pad. This should not rotate. I have a manual transmission car. I am in gear, and I have the parking brake set. So this should not rotate. I'm testing that. We are good there. I have some sand on top of my suspension members. That's kind of interesting. We do have quite a bit of rust. This is a 2018 Subaru. I am going to be trying to apply a light oil this year, try and grind away a little bit of this rust and do my own DIY undercoating, so stay tuned for that. But I imagine it's something to do with my brake pads, and as we look here, right here, come on mama, there we go. I don't have brake pads, so I have the metal that the brake pad is connected to, and this is going to be your caliper. There is a piston right here, and when you step down on your pedal, you're going to be pressurizing the hydraulic fluid, your brake fluid, to this piston. That piston is going to be pushing in, which is going to close the caliper on both sides, ideally even pressure, and it's going to squeeze your disc rotor. And by applying that friction, that is what slows down your 4,000, 5,000 pound vehicle. So very simple concept behind it, very expensive implementation. But basically I'm looking at no pad, which means I've gotten maybe 15 or 17,000 miles out of these brake pads. I'll have to look at my records to confirm. Not great. I would have liked more. Let me go ahead and pull out my Pocalit AA flashlight. And let's see what we got on the other side. So if I look through here, we are very close on both of those. So we're going to absolutely need new pads. While we're in here, this rotor is destroyed. We have the obvious scoring and poor surface, in addition to quite a bit of rust here. So if I'm going to be in for a pence, I'll be in for a pound, or whatever the slogan is. But we're just going to go ahead and replace all that stuff. Interesting that we don't have the same amount of damage on the other side. That's fine. Typically brake pads come in a set of 2, so I'll just keep that secondary set in the trunk of the car with my toolkit, and I will be able to replace the other side when we need to. But I now know what the problem is. I know what the cause of the noise is. Luckily, it's something simple. It's a rotor and the brake pads. Both of those are disposable, usable, wearable components. So simple enough to locate, simple enough to order. We will get those on order, and we will go ahead and do a partial brake and rear rotor replacement on a 2018 base model Subaru. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put this guy back together. I'm going to get parts on order. While we're here, I'm going to go ahead and roll the tire backwards, and we're going to check for any kind of uneven wear patterns, broken tread, picked up nails, screws, anything like that. I have quite a bit of what I would have called rust, but now I know is remnants of my brake pad all over this guy. I will be cleaning that off when I do the brake rebuild. There's really no point in doing it right now because it's going to continue to grind until I get those parts installed, and that will rely on how quickly Amazon delivers. But we went ahead and checked the tread. Everything looks good on it. We're going to go ahead and get started putting it back together. When we put this guy back on, we're going to finger tighten all 5 of the lug nuts on there. We're going to seat them. We're going to lower the car back down onto the ground so that the wheel is not sitting or held up in the air. We want the resistance of the ground holding the tread of the tires so that I'm not fighting the rotation of the rear axle. And I will torque all 5 of the lug nuts in a star pattern. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'd rather do it twice than lose all the lug nuts once. After that, I usually treat myself by going to Dairy Queen. It's about a 2.5 mile round trip drive. That will allow any vibrations or heat or friction or anything to possibly walk some of the lug nuts free. And I will go ahead and do the 5-star pattern again. And that will make it good enough for me to do a trip to work and back. That's about a 60-70 mile drive at highway speeds. I will take my torque wrench with me and make sure that all of them are seated in the driver or the parking lot there. And then once I get home, I seat them as well. So I lifted the tire and put it up on the 1 stud there. I'm going to go ahead and use my feet to push the tire into place and hold it relatively level, perpendicular to the ground. I'm going to get this first one just hand tightened, and now if I let my feet off, you can see the tire will slop, but it will not pivot on me. It will not rotate off for me. So I'm just going to go ahead and do all 5 of these. You'll notice I do not use power tools. You can use a power tool or a air ratchet or something like that to get these off. You absolutely do not want to use them to start or seat lug nuts onto your studs here. The reason for that is I can take the time and make sure that my threads are lined up. Typically, you'll see I start going counterclockwise. I'm actually unscrewing this, and you'll feel and sometimes you'll hear the thread pitch inside the lug nut lining up with the threads cut into the exterior of the stud there. So I'm just getting it started, and I only have so much torque with the tips of my finger, right? Versus an air gun, as soon as I and start spinning it, it's got so much speed and torque, it can cross thread or recut threads or seat too deeply and break off studs. These are things I don't want to deal with. I got enough issues with the brake premature wear going on. So I go ahead and do these things by hand. It gets me out of the house. I only have some of the tools anyways, but this is the better way to go. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm rocking the rim back and forth, and that's going to allow me to get these started a little bit better. They're not going to hang up quite as much. Just, I'm not oscillating it, but just a slight wobble back and forth. I'm going to get these seated enough, well, finger tighted enough where I'm probably 5 or 6 threads on there. Some of them will be looser than others. I don't care. We have substantially less wobble. Things are going to go ahead and seat as we go. But now I can go ahead and grab my breaker bar. And you can see I'm relying just on speed. If I wanted to torque them, I could go ahead and start angling it way out here, right? But as we just covered, I'm not looking for torque. I'm not looking to cut or break anything. Right here, I have very little leverage, which means I have very little torque. So eventually, I'm not even going to be able to grab the bar and rotate it anymore. And that's going to be seated enough for my purposes. So I'm just trying to spin this enough. So right about there, it becomes difficult to do one-handed. I'm going to move on to my next one. I can spin this pretty freely. Right about here, I'm starting to meet resistance, and I can no longer spin it. So we're going to do that each time. I'm just looking to get it finger tight. All right, so that's about it. Now when I try and pivot the wheel, it's not going anywhere. I can go ahead and lower the tire back onto the ground. Remember, I am off the ground a little bit. So first I need to jack up or lower the jack here, which will lower my suspension. Then I'm going to take the jack, put it back over here, raise up the body enough to take the jack stand out, and I will go ahead and do a couple of push-ups. As I'm doing push-ups, I'm going to make sure that I haven't left any material. I don't have any nuts and bolts or screws or anything that I'm not remembering to collect up underneath the car, and we will go ahead and proceed from there. All right, so we've removed our jack stand. We're going to go ahead and lower the vehicle down with the jack. Again, we're going to do a couple push-ups and make sure that I didn't leave anything underneath the vehicle. We're going to remove the chocks from behind the wheels, and we're going to go ahead and torque our lug nuts. All right, so we are now clear. We have nothing underneath the vehicle. At this point, we need to go ahead and ensure that we have torqued all of our lug nuts into place. And again, I go ahead and torque them twice. So this is going to be our torque wrench. What you'll do is you'll set your torquage here. I go by foot-pounds, and according to the Subaru manual, it should be 90 foot-pounds of torque on those lug nuts. So you'll see it's broken into 10 foot-pounds of torque increments. We have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 as we go up. So I'm going to rotate this bottom knurled handle up to the 90. So I want that 0 to be right at the bottom of the 90 there. And then you turn this bottom black knurled nut, which of course it's not going to focus. And that will lock the silver knurled handle and prevent it from spinning. The last thing I need is to be trying to torque down those lug nuts as I'm spinning the silver knurled handle there. And now I'm doing 90, 95, 100, 105 foot-pounds. And I have uneven torque on all of those. So we're going to go ahead and spin this to 90. We're going to lock it into place with the black knurled nut at the bottom. And then we can go ahead and get started. So here we have the 90 foot-pounds, and it's set to 90 with an additional increment of 0. So if the 8 were in line with that 90, it would be 98 foot-pounds. I guess the 90 would almost be covered. So actually, if that 8 was rotated here, it would be 88 foot-pounds. But You'll also notice that I had to set this to 90. With this vehicle, you would think I would just leave it to 90 and be done with it. My understanding is the more you let this sit at any of the pre-tension ratings, you could start having some walking tolerances and run into some issues there. So I just go ahead and reset it to 0 every time. You will know that you did not set it to the proper torquage, because when you torque this, the way that you know that you've reached 90 foot-pounds is you'll be torquing on the lug nut, and as you're spinning it, you'll get more and more and more and more resistance, and suddenly you hear a click click, and I will show you later on in the video what that is. And that is telling you that the wrench internal mechanism is preventing you from applying any more of the torque, and it's giving you an audible and tactile clue that you have reached your torque rating. So let's go ahead and attempt to do the first one with my makeshift tripod here and see what we can get. Okay, so again, I can try lifting and using my upper body muscles to pull this guy up until we get a click, and you can hear it right there. And we'll get you a little closer here. So you're going to hear and feel and see your wrench click like that. All right. So that's when you know that you've reached the setting that you put. That doesn't mean that your torque wrench isn't capable of giving more, but it's maxing out at the 90 foot-pounds that I have set it to. So again, I can sit here and I can try, using my legs as leverage to pull this guy up. Or it's going to be easier for me to go ahead and push down. So I usually try and spin it like this until we get some pretty firm resistance. I'm going to go ahead and just start leaning forward. And right there is the indication that I've hit my 90 foot-pounds. So I did 1, 2, we're going to do 3. Also, make sure, I'm going to back you up. I'm going to assume that this is showing. Make sure that you are not scoring or gouging your paint job. That will become more relevant when you are here, because now I am in front of my paint. It's less of an issue as I'm on the rear lug nuts in this case. But go ahead and put your hand along the back here. It's better for your finger to hit the dirt on your paint than to have metal go into your paint. But I'm going to go ahead and take up right there. So that's my 90. That's my 90. This one's still quite loose. All right, now we got resistance, and that's my 90. All right. So I know that I've done it once. I'm going to make sure that I've done all of them a second time, and that will ensure that they've all at least been done the one time. Okay. 3. That's 4. And that's 5. So stay tuned for part 2, which is going to be replacing the rear brake rotor and rear brake pads on this 2018 Subaru Forester. Any questions, comments, concerns you have, leave them in the comments section below. I enjoy hearing from you guys. And again, this is outside the target demographic. This is kind of a new video format for me. With car maintenance and stuff. So if that's something you are interested in, go ahead and let me know. If there's anything you would like me to cover with this vehicle, let me know as well. And until the next video, I will catch you guys next time.